Go for the pulls and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
What's up, everybody, and welcome into the Philly Sports Power Hour with Bill Colarulo. On this beautiful Wednesday, we're going to be joined like we are every Wednesday by the one and only Kayla Santiago a little bit later in the show. She always does a great job covering the Eagles and the Sixers, so Kayla will be joining us a little bit later. We're going to do some Sixers talk. Want to talk about some things that went on in the NFL yesterday. Some franchise tags. Some franchise tags that were placed that broke my heart. We talked about one of my dream free agent signings on the show for a couple of weeks now, and doesn't look like that's going to happen. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. I got to talk about high school basketball. Big controversy for high school basketball, but we'll talk about it all. But this is the Philly Sports Power Hour. Let's get a little roll call. We're streaming live across the JAKIB Sports Network. We're also live across all my social channels, Bill Colarulo, Philly Sports Talk. We're live here on TikTok as well. I appreciate that, Nashaka, saying some kind words on TikTok. But let's get a little roll call. I see William Stark in the house, Rob at Temple, Jason A-Team, Jim G, Flexin and Steppin, Eric Gallagher, Matt Beach. Who else we got in the house? Rob at Temple, Chuck Hutton, SP Lou. And I see more and more people joining on the TikTok chat as well. So we'll jump into it because a lot to cover before the one and only Kayla Santiago joins the show. But let's talk a little bit about Jason Kelce one more time, and we'll talk to Kayla, get her take on the whole Kelce situation. And Wine Niners Wine, good morning to you as well. Oh, I said Nashaka. It's the New England Shake-Up Sports Podcast. My apologies. Checking in on TikTok. But let's talk about Jason Kelce because obviously we talked about it at length yesterday and the day before about the retirement. But I'm not sure if everybody saw the story that came out last night about trainer Joe Opella and what Jason Kelce meant to trainer Joe Opella. And if you didn't see the story, for those who didn't see it, so Jason Kelce had a knee injury early in his career. The trainer at the time for the Eagles, Joe Opella, said, hey, I need to treat Jason Kelce like an athlete, not your typical offensive lineman, in rehabbing him. And then they formed a very strong bond, became extremely close, and Joe Opella would tape up Jason Kelce's ankles every single game. Well, unfortunately, trainer Joe was diagnosed with cancer this year and had to undergo chemo treatments. And in addition to being somebody that would always call Joe, Jason Kelce would call him, make sure he was okay. Ask him if he needed him to buy food for him and have prepared meals sent for him and his wife, all these things. Well, unfortunately, Joe, because of chemo treatments, missed the wild card game in Tampa Bay. And when Kelce told trainer Joe, I'm going to be retiring, Joe was upset. He said, oh, man, I'm not going to be the last guy to ever tape your ankles. So Jason Kelce had Joe tape his ankles for the retirement press conference we all watched on Monday. Unbelievable, man. You got to read the story because there was some video of Jason Kelce walking around after the retirement press conference and he's got his ankles taped. And now we know why. Incredible. And I see Matt Beach on YouTube saying Kelce could run for president of the United States right now and win in a landslide. You're probably right. He probably would have a legitimate shot at winning. And I think that says less about how incredible Jason Kelce is and means to a lot of people. And it probably says more about the state of politics right now. But we don't do politics on this show. But let's jump in. Let's talk a little bit of high school basketball real quick. So a lot of controversy yesterday in the semifinals? Camden versus Manasquan. Camden High School sinks a free throw to go up by 1 with only a couple seconds left. Manasquan rushes down the court, takes a shot, misses. There's a putback. Manasquan wins the game. And then the referees get together and they decide to overrule the basket, saying that it was shot after the clock expired. But everybody with their cell phones who was videoing, it clearly shows there was time left on the clock, but there's no reviews in high school. There's no replay in high school. So the win was given to Camden High, even though clearly Manasquan puts it in with time left on the clock. Devastating. Absolutely devastating. Now listen, I have more connection to Camden High than I do to Manasquan. I live closer to Camden. But I just look at all the kids and I'm thinking, man, high school students, high school athletes, for your career to end that way, to be that close, because Camden was heavily favored. So for Manasquan to be that close to legitimately upsetting Camden High and it to be overturned on a bad call, whew, that one hurts. And I don't know what you do. I mean, the replay clearly shows there was time left on the clock, but what do you do? There's no replay in high school basketball. So that one hurts. Well, let's talk about the 76ers as we're talking basketball. They lose last night to the Brooklyn Nets, 112-107. Sixers were up by 14 at one point in that game. They were up 92-84 in the fourth quarter, and then they let Brooklyn go on an 11-0 run. Blow that game. And it's a meaningful game. Every game matters for the Sixers right now, trying to stay in the top 6. But they blow it. 112-107. Tyrese Maxey with, quote-unquote, delayed concussion symptoms. Not sure I've ever seen that before, but delayed concussion symptoms. He misses the game last night. He's probably not going to play tonight against the Memphis Grizzlies. So they roll out a starting 5 last night of Kyle Lowry and Mo Bamba back in the starting lineup for the 3rd straight game. Tobias Harris and Buddy Hield. But Cam Payne gets the start last night. Didn't play much, though. They took him out almost right away, but he was your starting 5. Oubre has the best game of the season for him. Puts up 30 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. Tobias, not the best game he's had over the last 3, but certainly better than what we saw in the first couple games after the All-Star break. He drops 18, 9 boards, 4 assists. Obviously, no Maxey. I just said it. No Embiid. Still no DeAnthony Melton. And no Robert Covington, who I'm not sure is even coming back. But I want to talk to Kayla Little Sixers when she joins the show because they debuted Jeff Doughton Jr., who's on a 2-way contract with the G League. Wasn't expecting to see him play, but he actually got some real playing time yesterday. So we'll talk to Kayla. Sixers are back in action against the Grizzlies tonight, who also are experiencing some injuries. But Sixers need to win tonight. They're going to have to do it without Tyrese Maxey. But now they've fallen to the 7th seed. The Sixers are no longer in the top 6. They're tied with Miami, but Miami has the tiebreaker. So Miami Heat right now are the 6th seed. Sixers are the 7th seed. And they're only a game up on Indiana, who are the 8th seed. It's becoming more and more likely that the Sixers are going to be in that play-in tournament, which we're all trying to avoid. But let's hope they can get a win tonight. The Memphis Grizzlies are not a very good basketball team. Like I said, they're also experiencing injuries. They're not even in the playoff race in the West. They're 3-7 in their last 10. So hopefully the Sixers can do something tonight, get back in the winning column, and stay afloat. And we're still waiting. We're still waiting for a damn update from the Sixers about Joel. So we'll talk a little bit more Sixers when Kayla joins the show. But let's jump over to the NFL. Because if you follow me, you watch this show, you know my dream free agent signing at the safety position was Antoine Winfield Jr. And we talked about it on the show yesterday. And I think I literally said yesterday that Tampa Bay would be dumb if they let Antoine Winfield out the door. Well, unfortunately, they're not dumb. They applied the franchise tag yesterday to Antoine Winfield Jr. So it looks like the chances of the Philadelphia Eagles getting Antoine Winfield isn't going to happen. So some other franchise tags that were placed yesterday. Wide receiver Michael Pittman from the Indianapolis Colts. It's the first time the Colts have applied the tag since Pat McAfee, I think all the way back in like 2013 or something. I didn't think Michael Pittman was a possibility for the Eagles anyway. I know some people had said that and floated that. He had his first year with over 1,000 yards, I believe. He was going to require a lot of money. That wasn't going to happen. So I'm not concerned about that one. Cornerback Jalen Johnson from the Chicago Bears was franchise tagged. I know he was a name that a lot of Eagles fans were interested in, but he's staying in Chicago. Edge rusher Josh Allen. That was a name I was looking out for because if the Philadelphia Eagles were unable to come to an agreement on an extension with Haason Reddick and they decided to trade him, well, then I thought that they would go into free agency and make a splash with one of these younger edge rushers, and one of them being Josh Allen. And I posted on Twitter yesterday that I was upset Josh Allen got franchise tagged, and somebody commented underneath, what has Josh Allen done that Jalen Hurts hasn't? Different person. Not Josh Allen, the quarterback. I'm not calling for Josh Allen, the quarterback. I wanted to see them make a run at Josh Allen, the edge rusher from Jacksonville, if, in fact, they're unable to make any sort of extension with Haason and he gets traded. But I've said this before on the show. Even if they bring back Reddick, and even if they bring back Josh Sweat, and even though I'm not ruling out Nolan Smith, I still think they need another edge rusher on this team, even if BG comes back for his 15th season. So Josh Allen was one of them. Another one was edge rusher Brian Burns from Carolina. Unfortunately, he gets franchise tagged. So two of the best edge rushers in free agency, Josh Allen and Brian Burns, both get the tag. Now, there are three edge rushers that didn't get the tag that maybe the Philadelphia Eagles could take a look at. Daniel Hunter from the Minnesota Vikings, he's 29. Bryce Huff from the New York Jets, he's only 25. And then the one that a lot of people are connecting the dots with Vic Fangio, Andrew Van Ginkel from Miami. So I won't, what am I saying? I'm stuttering there. I won't be surprised if Howie Roseman come next Monday signs another edge rusher, even if Haason Reddick is still on the team. Some other franchise tags that were applied. Cornerback L'Jarius Sneed. We knew that one was coming in Kansas City. That's been reported for a while that they were going to franchise him and then maybe trade him. And I see people asking in the chat, Jim G saying, can you trade for guys that are tagged? So once the franchise tag is applied, the way the franchise tag works, well, first of all, the amount of the 1-year guarantee is an average of the top 5 salaries. But players can actually negotiate with other teams, and the team that applied the franchise tag has a right to match it. But if they don't match it, they get 2 first-round draft picks. So once the franchise tag is applied, if that player signs with another team, you have a right to say, hey, I want to match the contract, and they stay, or you get 2 first-round draft picks. So it's very unlikely that anybody's going to give up 2 first-round draft picks for a player. Extremely unlikely. So L'Jarius Sneed, another one, wide receiver T. Higgins from Cincinnati, and defensive tackle Justin Madubuike from the Baltimore Ravens. Now, there was one transition tag applied. So what's the difference between the transition tag and the franchise tag? Well, like I just said, in the franchise tag, the team has a right to match the offer, and if they don't, they get 2 first-round draft picks. If you apply the transition tag, you have a right to match the contract offer from the other team, but you don't get anything if you don't match it. So the New England Patriots applied the transition tag to Kyle Duggar, the safety, who's another guy that I'd have some interest in. He's only 27 years old. So New England applies the transition tag to him, meaning they have a right of first refusal, but they wouldn't get anything if a team like the Eagles swooped in, made him a contract offer. They just would have a right to match it. That's what the transition tag is. So Kyle Duggar is still available as well, technically. And then you also have Saquon Barkley didn't get tagged. Defensive tackle Christian Wilkins from Miami didn't get the tag. We talked about edge rusher Daniel Hunter and Bryce Huff. Some other names out there that didn't get tagged that you should keep an eye on. Safety Xavier McKinney from the New York Giants. He's only 24 years old. Safety Cameron Curl from the Washington Commanders, only 24 years old. And safety Geno Stone from the Baltimore Ravens, only 24 years old. And linebacker Patrick Queen. He's the linebacker I want. I've talked about that before. I want Patrick Queen at linebacker, but I need a big splash at safety too. And I'm not talking about Chauncey Gardner Johnson. Sign Chauncey Gardner Johnson, great. But that can't be the entire plan at safety. You can't go into this season with Reed Blankenship, Chauncey Gardner Johnson, and Sidney Brown. Chauncey Gardner Johnson can't stay healthy. Sidney Brown's coming back from an ACL tear. Reed Blankenship hasn't been able to stay healthy in 2 seasons. You need something else there too. So get one of those guys. Get McKinney, get Curl, get Geno Stone. And if you can't get a Patrick Queen, Frankie Lavu from Carolina, another possibility. Jordan Brooks from Seattle, maybe a possibility. So we'll see what shakes on there. But when we get back, we're going to be joined by Kayla Santiago. So I haven't had a chance to talk to her yet about her take on the whole Jason Kelce stuff. I obviously want to talk to her about some Sixers. She does a great job covering the Sixers. She also does a good job covering the Delaware Bluecoats. So I want to talk to her because I believe, I could be mistaken, but I think Jeff Doughton Jr. may have been on the Bluecoats or at least in the G League. So maybe she'll be able to give us some insight on why he's getting some playing time last night. So this is the Philly Sports Power Hour. Hit that like button for me. Hit that share button for me. And when we get back, Kayla Santiago will be joining the show. Stay tuned.
Go for the pulls and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one, and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and certainly the easiest when you're watching the NBA. And the NBA playoffs are almost here, and you can win money making picks. What are you waiting for? Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code WIN. An Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN. Get ready for the NBA and get ready for the NBA playoffs. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
EAGLES. Eagles.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Philly Sports Power Hour with Bill Colarulo. Before the break, we were doing a little Sixers talk, little NFL franchise tag talk. But now, like, we are joined every Wednesday by the one and only Kayla Santiago. What's up, Kayla?
How you doing? Can't complain. You know, a little bit emotional this week. Jason Kelce retiring, which I think that when he had an emergency press conference, we knew what was happening. But, you know, overall, it's been some positive vibes. Nothing too crazy with the Sixers and the Eagles. Maybe a little bit better than last week, though.
Yeah, we'll get into the Sixers in a second, but since you brought up Jason Kelce, you watched that press conference?
I watched the entire, 45 minutes press conference. I mean, the second that he walked up to the podium and just his hands in his face and started bawling, I started tearing up. I mean, I think we all kind of knew what was going to happen when he called the press conference, but, you know, it's just so much emotion. When you look at a player like Jason Kelce, I think it was the perfect speech for him as a player. That's exactly who he is. And it's funny, I was watching with a lot of people that aren't Eagles fans, and they said, oh my gosh, this is so long. You would think he's a 6-time Super Bowl champion. He's from the city of Philadelphia, played his entire career there. Well, he's not originally from there, but he played his entire career there. And this is Jason Kelce. This is so on brand for him. I wouldn't have expected anything less. And I say that he's given the two best speeches ever in history, maybe, of the NFL, with his Super Bowl and his retirement speech.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you at all. And I said on yesterday's show, I didn't know we needed a white men can't jump reference, but man, when he compared himself to Billy Hoyle, I don't know if you're old enough for that movie. You ever see that movie?
I've seen parts of it. I'm not old enough for it, but I knew his reference what he was talking about.
Oh, you got to go watch that. It's one of my favorites of all time with Woody Harrelson and Wesley Snipes. But while we're talking about Kelce, I mean, what was your biggest takeaway of that speech? It was a great speech. You just said it, one of the best we've ever seen, 45 minutes. What was your biggest takeaway?
I think just the credit he gave to Just Stoutland was really, you know, awesome to me, because you look at the entire organization, and I think that's a name that you don't really hear that much. Now, that's something that we talked about in the offseason, saying, okay, who do you get rid of? Everybody but him, right? When you look at the Philadelphia Eagles. But I just think the credit that he was able to give to him, and also just what he was able to say, how he kind of grew up, how his family was by his side. You know, it was really cool to me that he kind of implemented every single part of his career. And I think the biggest thing, too, is, you know, the credit to Nick Sirianni that he gave. I think a lot of people think that Nick Sirianni lost the locker room last year. And as bad as a season as it was, and even Jason Kelce admitted that, he talks about what Nick Sirianni has already done in his short career with the Philadelphia Eagles. So I think that was really cool, and I think it should get a lot of Eagles fans confidence going into the season, bringing Nick Sirianni back.
Even a reference to the infamous flower speech from Jason Kelce when talking about Nick Sirianni.
Yes.
So I agree with you. I thought that was pretty cool. And then did you see the story? I was talking about it before you joined, the story about how he had his trainer tape his ankles one last time before the press conference. Did you see that?
Yes, I did see that. I actually saw it resurface on my Twitter today. So that was kind of crazy to think about, and just seeing the little integral things that, he talks about and that he did. And it's interesting because I also saw, an interview with Kelce after the fact, his wife saying that they've gone through speeches for the past 4 seasons with Jason Kelce on retiring. So when you think about that, he's really been contemplating it for a while now. And I think it was hard for him to say goodbye. I think realistically he might be able to play, but you want to get to the point where as a father and as a family man, you want to be able to sit on the floor and play with your kids. You don't want to be in so much pain having to stand up and do that. And I think Jason Kelce kind of realized that from a family standpoint, that, okay, if he plays just a little bit more, it might not be too good for his body. So I love the speech. There was so much to take away from it. The Kelce talk, which I loved, because clearly I love her. And, kind of just her vibe and everything like that. And just, the times that he talks about with Carson Wentz, Nick Foles, Jalen Hurts, it was really cool to see.
And he also did a great job describing what it takes to be a player in the city of Philadelphia with this fan base. And he's spot on. I mean, I say it all the time that the players who get it will be loved forever. He said they will be demigods in this town, and he was spot on. Jason Kelce probably got this city better than any athlete that's ever come through here.
Yeah, and I said that as well. I tweeted that out when I was watching it. Just when you talk about a player embracing the city from start to finish and realizing that, you look at Jason Kelce, and that's exactly the example of if you're an athlete that wants to play in the city of Philadelphia, no matter what sport it is. Because you look at Jason Kelce and he says, listen, I've gotten booed before. I've gotten people that, told me that I shouldn't be on the team, and rightfully so. That's what he said. He said, listen, at this point, I was really bad. I didn't even know if the Eagles were going to keep me. And then they did. And he put the effort in. He worked hard. He had seasons where he played every single snap, to the point now where he's a Hall of Fame center. It's just crazy to think about how his career really landscaped in Philadelphia. And he's definitely a fan favorite. I mean, just his personality, the way that he's open with the fans. And there's just so much passion there. And that's what I think a lot of Philadelphia fans love. The passion of the city, I think, is unlimited and unrelentless when you look at Philadelphia. It's unlike any other place to play in. And Jason Kelce, he brings that all the time, whether he's playing football or whether he's not. So, he completely emulates the city of Philadelphia. And it's tough to say goodbye, but I think for Kelce and for a lot of people that he just knew it was the right time to kind of hang that jersey up one last time as a player and kind of move on to whatever the next chapter is for him.
Yeah, wish him the best of luck, but we need now to turn the page and say, well, what happens to this Philadelphia Eagles football team? I think there's a plan in place as to who the center is going to be, but who do you see really stepping up and being a leader on this football team? Because it's also being reported Fletcher Cox is probably retiring this offseason. So who do you see really stepping up and being a leader in 2024?
Yeah, it's tough too, because then you also look at BG, right, who has had a phenomenal career with the Eagles so many moments, who's also a leader on the defensive side of the ball. What is he going to do if he wants to come back? Are the Eagles even going to take him back? Maybe he'll take a little bit of a minimum. We don't really know. So, we go back to this conversation of, is Jalen Hurts really a vocal leader or is he not? And I understand that's not everybody's personality, and I do think that's completely fine. But when you look at the team, how it's constructed and what it's going to be next year, when you're losing guys that are true veterans on your team, like Jason Kelce, possibly like Fletcher Cox, I think you look at it and you say, okay, Jalen Hurts to me needs to step up as a leader. And I'm not saying that he needs to be super vocal and that guy that's like Jason Kelce or B-Dog or anything like that. But I'm saying it to a point, either lead by example or really come in, have those conversations, make sure that you're having those conversations, not just with the guys on offense, but really making it like a family morale, because that's also something Jason Kelce said. He said, every time somebody would step in that locker room, they know exactly what it was. It was a family. And I think when you look at that, you need Jalen Hurts to say, okay, well, have conversation with the guys on the line, on the defense, stuff like that. Be that leader, because in the quarterback position, I think you already are kind of a leader in that standpoint, just based on your position. So I think he needs to step up, because if Fletch is not there, if Kelce's not there, I think BG could be more of that vocal guy for you. But in terms of somebody that's really going to lead your team to success and really come in through the next few seasons, to me, it has to be Jalen. And I think that's easier said than done because to me, he doesn't seem like a super vocal leader guy, but I think that he can put that plan in place to kind of do that with such big veterans leaving.
Yeah, and I think it's a great opportunity for Jalen Hurts. Now it's an opportunity for him to really take the reins of this football team because, look, when he came in here, yeah, you're right, the quarterback is the quote-unquote leader. But, you have a Jason Kelce, you have a Fletcher Cox, guys who are already very established as the vocal leaders in that locker room. Well, now it's his opportunity to do what we've heard the organization wants him to do, which is to be a little bit more vocal, to be a little bit better of a leader. And, I had Joe Santoliquito on my 97.5 The Fanatic show over the weekend, and I thought it was interesting because he was one of the reporters who wrote a story at the end of the season about how the team wants Jalen to be a better leader. And I thought what was really interesting is Joe wanted to make sure no one said Hurts was a bad leader. They said they want him to be a better leader. So I thought that was an important distinction because they're not saying, hey, Jalen Hurts doesn't know how to lead. It's just, hey, there's ways that you can improve as a leader, just like you improve on the field. So I agree with you. Let's hope it's Jalen, and I think this is a great opportunity. But I want to talk more NFL in a second. Let's switch gears. I want to talk a little bit of NBA basketball because you do such a great job covering the 76ers. So they lose last night. No Tyrese Maxey because of delayed concussion symptoms. But it was the third game in a row now with Kyle Lowry in the starting lineup. And I do like what I'm seeing from Lowry, but how much can we rely on a 37-year-old point guard to play that many minutes?
Yeah, I think it's tough when you look at it from this standpoint because Joel Embiid's clearly still out. Tyrese Maxey is going to be out, at least from that game, maybe another game as well. And you look at Kyle Lowry and you say, okay, you like the minutes that he's playing, but realistically, how much is he going to play down the line, especially when they get to that playoff push as well? You kind of go less deeper into your bench. He has that experience. I think right now it's fine. And I think the reason that he's playing so many minutes, it's just because they don't really know what to do with their lineup with Joel Embiid out and, of course, Tyrese Maxey out as well. So you get to a point. Now, if Tyrese Maxey were to miss extended time, I do think you have to be careful with Kyle Lowry because you look at it and you say, okay, at his age and his injury status as of late, you don't really want to push him because I think he is somebody that you do want to have in the playoffs. You're not going to play him a ton of minutes, but you're going to want to put him in for that energy guy, somebody that has experience being able to kind of back Tyrese Maxey up. So I do think that you need to be careful. But if you're talking short term in the next few games, if Tyrese Maxey's going to miss maybe 2 or 3, I'm not too worried about it right now. I think when you go to that week or more range, that's when you start to have those conversations of saying, okay, we need to wind back his minutes just a little bit. Because to me, if he plays so many, if Tyrese Maxey's out for a little bit longer, Kyle Lowry is going to be nothing but dust in the playoffs. So,
yeah, and he played 36 minutes last night, I'm looking at right now. So, yeah, not ideal for a 37-year-old point guard. But another player who played over 36 minutes last night was your boy, Kelly Oubre, who I know you're a fan of, and he has a season-high 30 points. What did you like from Kelly Oubre last night?
I mean, listen, I've really liked his game ever since the Sixers were able to get him. I think that for him, it was more about, okay, well, Tyrese Maxey's not playing. This is a brand new lineup. Somehow they want to figure out how to win this game. I think Kelly just went off. And I think that's a good mindset to have because, when you get to the playoffs, yes, Kelly Oubre is not going to be your number one scorer, right? But there might be times where a team has a really good defensive game plan on Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, and who's going to be that third guy? And consistently for the Sixers, it really hasn't been anybody because Tobias Harris is another guy that you kind of look at and you say, okay, well, he's played a little bit better, but can you really rely on him to be that third scorer if teams have really good game plans on Tyrese and Joel Embiid? So to see that Kelly Oubre can have a game like that he has the potential in him, I think it's super important because once you get to that playoff push and you're playing the better teams that have better defenses, you need another guy that can kind of step up where a team's not expecting to be able to hit a 3 from the perimeter, to be able to drive in and create some offense, to be able to score when Joel and Tyrese might not be having their best night.
Yeah, and I mentioned Kyle Lowry has been in the starting lineup the last 3 games. Nick Nurse also made another change the last 3 games, having Mo Bamba starting over Paul Reed. What do you think about that move?
I actually like it, and I understand that I think at this point of his career that Paul Reed is a better player than Mo Bamba, but I think Paul Reed is a better bench player in terms of coming off the bench. Because when Joel Embiid does come back, that's going to be the duty for Paul Reed. And I think that it kind of lights him up a little bit. The thing I love about Paul, I really think that for him, he says the phrase out the mud. It's just about the opportunity. He's not an egotistical guy. So if he's in the starting lineup and then he gets put on the bench, he's going to play with that same fire, maybe even a little bit more, because he wants to get some playing time. All he wants to do is play basketball. So I really like the move. And I like that Nick Nurse is not afraid to kind of work around with this lineup with his 2 stars out. I think it's important to really see what lineups you really want going into the playoffs, because once again, you're not going to see Mo Bamba in a playoff game unless Joel Embiid is hurt. But you know what you have just in case Paul Reed goes down, or if Paul Reed's in foul trouble and you need somebody else to back up Joel Embiid. So I really like that Nick Nurse is kind of moving around with this lineup while he has the chance with Joel out and last night Tyrese out.
And that brings us to the biggest question around the Sixers team. When is Joel Embiid coming back? There was a report by Katie George of ESPN the other night that he started on-court activities. He's now lifting 100% of his weight. What's going on? What are you hearing? When's he coming back?
So I've been hearing a lot of the end of the month and the end of March. And I do truly believe that. I think that it's also going to depend just how confident he is, because there's one thing about being back in practice and being back on the court and shooting around and working with your trainers. It's another thing to put full pressure on that in a full speed game that you really haven't been in a while. So I think you look at the end of the month, maybe the beginning of April, and I think that's the perfect time. Now, my fear is that, of course he's not going to be at 100%, but my fear is that if you bring him back too early, are you in fear of another injury? Because right now his body isn't 100%. And even if he gets his conditioning up, there's still a difference between, practicing and playing. And we say it even with football as well. When you look at week 1 of the NFL, everybody looks crazy because they think they can go from practice and training camp right to a game without preseason game, right? It's the same thing when you look at Joel Embiid right now. Yeah, he can be good in practice. Yeah, he can practice well with his teammates and his trainers. But when you bring him to a game, I think his body is going to be super vulnerable. So sometimes bringing him back earlier scares me a little bit. But I do think, once again, it's important. If you're going to bring him back at all, it has to be a little bit of time during the regular season before it gets to the playoffs. So he has an opportunity to kind of get everything ready. And that's why I also think it's really good that Nick Nurse is kind of playing around with this lineup with Mo Bamba and Paul Reed, because when Joel comes back, he's probably going to be limited a little bit, right? You're not going to play him the minutes that you play him consistently when you're looking at what we've seen before his injury. So I think that's important that they're really kind of navigating with that lineup with Mo Bamba and Paul Reed. And hopefully the end of March, beginning of April, we'll see Joel Embiid, because I need it on my screen. The Sixers team has been tough to watch. I've been following them, of course, because I have to. But when you look at it, I miss Joel Embiid out there. It's just so different without him on that Sixers team.
Yeah, and not only do they need him to come back so that he's in shape for the playoffs, they may need him to come back to get out of that play-in tournament, because after the loss last night, they now sit at number 7 officially out of that top 6 and in the play-in tournament. You think they can get into that top 6, or are we looking at probably a 7 or 8 seed headed to the playoffs?
I feel like they really need to. I think that going in the play-in is extremely dangerous for a few reasons. You're talking about you need to win one game. And when you look at the NBA, having one game, it could be anybody's night, right? Joel Embiid could be having a bad day that day, a bad game. Tyrese Maxey could as well. Tobias Harris could either be 28 points to Tobias Harris or 2 points to Tobias Harris. That's one game where you're deciding if you're going to advance. Now, I get it. If you win, you're kind of in. If you lose, you get another opportunity to play if you're that 8 seed. But at the same time, to me, I think you need to get into that top 6. Not only that, you do not want to be playing the number 1 or 2 seed when you're in the playoffs for your first matchup. You absolutely do not. The last time that happened where the Sixers played a higher seed was before this whole play-in tournament fiascos, was in the bubble to the Celtics. And what happened? They got swept in the bubble. So that's the last thing that you want to see, because to me, if you play a higher team in the first round and you get swept or beat, what was the point of bringing Joel Embiid back? At this point, your whole knowledge of bringing him back is to get past the second round that they have not been able to get past in such a long time. So when you look at that, to me, I think you absolutely need to get in that top 6. And I think they can do it with Joel Embiid coming back. It's going to take a lot, though. They need to really start winning games right now without him in the lineup.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I know I see people in the chat saying, well, you get a second shot in the play-in tournament, but it's still one game against an opposing team. So if you lose as the 7 or 8 seed, well, now you get one more shot to try to win again. But this is why in a 7-game series, it's a lot less likely for upsets to happen because a team has to beat you 4 times. But one game, it's the reason why we see it every year. March Madness right around the corner, the NCAA tournament, there's a lot of upsets because it's only one game. One more Sixers question for you. You do a great job covering the Delaware Blue Coats, and I believe Jeff Doughton Jr. was on the Blue Coats before being called up to the Sixers. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so he was on the Blue Coats for a while. He was injured in the beginning of the season, and then he recently just got that 2-way contract. So Kenny Lofton got waived by the Sixers, and I do think that was the right move. I think he was a good fit with the Blue Coats, but he was on that 2-way contract, and realistically, he's just not going to get any time playing because he's a big, and you already have bigs for the Sixers, even with Joel Embiid out. So I really like Jeff Doughton Jr. I think his game is extremely smooth. Ricky Council, also, I think he's become a really big fan favorite in the Sixers community. I always like how he played with the Blue Coats. He's a very young, explosive player. I'm excited to see what he can do. But Jeff Doughton, I think he can make a pretty big difference off the bench. If you're talking about bringing him up in games that Joel Embiid is out, I think that's when you want to start him and actually give him some minutes. He's a really smooth player, and he kind of already plays at the NBA level. And, you know, I've talked with a lot of the commentators as well. So Nick Stauskas, who used to play for the Sixers, if you remember the 10-win seasons, the TJ McConnell era, Nick Stauskas also played for them, and he's actually a commentator for the Blue Coats now. And talking to him is really interesting about it because he says Jeff Doughton is probably one of the most NBA-ready G League players that he's seen at a young level. So that's really exciting. Now, he's not going to be in the starting lineup or really probably get any extended playing time. But I think Nick Nurse, definitely might use him in certain situations if Tyrese is out for a little bit longer. And then, of course, having limited with Joel Embiid.
Well, Sixers are back in action tonight at home against the Memphis Grizzlies. Hopefully they can get back in the winning column and continue to just hover around that 6th seed until Joel comes back. But I want to talk to Kayla, little NFL talk. So the next time you appear on the show will be Wednesday of next week, which is officially when free agency will begin. I believe it's 12 o'clock on Wednesday, March 13th. But Monday, March 11th at 12 is when the legal tampering period starts. So we should start hearing a bunch of news about this person signing, that person signing. What's your dream? What do you want to see Howie Roseman do when the legal tampering period starts on Monday, March 11th?
You know what's funny? I thought this was a crazy thought for a really long time. And just recently, I've seen a lot of people talk about it. Somebody that I would love to have back that really was good on this team and that everybody thought, oh, well, we got James Bradbury. It's going to be okay with Darius Slay. Clearly, that wasn't okay. I really love CJ Gardner Johnson. And I know it's probably almost impossible to get him back the money that he wants and everything like that. But what he was able to do as a safety for this team, I think really goes unnoticed. And I think you saw that big gap last year. And the reason why I love CJ Gardner Johnson is because you look at him as well in that safety position. He's not only very good at what he does. I know sometimes he can get injured, but you look at it and you also say there's so many young guys behind him. You look at Sidney Brown, for example, who knows when he's going to be back. He tore that ACL towards the end of the season, but he can really be that leader for the young guys in that position while also being a very good player still in that position. I mean, the last lockdown safety the Eagles had was Malcolm Jenkins, and that feels like light years ago at this point, right? So, but you look at CJ Gardner Johnson, I really like his game. I like how he plays. Now, this could be a crazy dream that might never happen, but honestly, in a perfect world, if money didn't matter, if you could get that piece, I would absolutely love it on the defensive side of the ball because as we talked about before, to me, defense is something that you're really looking at because I don't think you can go to the draft with these positions, even linebacker either. I think you look at it and you say, okay, you really can't get young guys to come in. I get developing talent, but when you look at the offensive side of the ball, the experience you brought in your coordinator positions, I think you need guys that can really play. And I'm not saying it needs to be a lot of them, but you definitely need some experience back there. Darius Slay can be a good leader, but who else do you got back there in the secondary? I think you need another piece.
Yeah, and I don't think Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is as much of a crazy possibility as you're floating. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN actually reported over the weekend not to rule out a reunion between CJ and the Philadelphia Eagles. And
yes, please.
I've been of the belief I like that move. I would love to see them bring back CJ. But to me, that can't be all they do at safety because He only played 2 games last year. He tore his pec. We know he lacerated his liver or his kidney when he was here in 2022. Reed Blankenship's also showed he's a little bit of an injury-prone player. Sidney Brown, like you mentioned, tearing his ACL. I need more than just Gardner Johnson at the safety position. So if they bring back Chauncey, are you okay, or you want to see them bring in somebody else as well?
I know. I think they need to bring in definitely more pieces. I just think that you look at it and you say, okay, we mentioned CJ is a little bit injury prone. Once again, though, he can be that veteran leader. I think you need to bring more help back there. You also look at the linebacker position, though, and you say, okay, well, you also need people there. So realistically, who is Howie going to be able to get for the price that he wants in both positions? And I'd rather also get a really good linebacker and maybe CJ back there and then maybe go to the draft for another safety. And I hate to say that because you look at what happened to the Philadelphia Eagles this past season on kind of, gambling on those younger guys and seeing what happened. And sometimes you almost feel bad for them, especially a guy like Sidney Brown, who at least had some effort out there in trying to tackle this season in the secondary. But you say, okay, it's their first year in the NFL, and you have a first-year brand new defensive coordinator. And whatever the heck happened between Sean Desai and Matt Patricia, who even knows whose decision that was. But it was a lot of confusion on the defensive side of the ball. I think it'll be a little bit more better this season, bringing in a new coordinator. But no, I agree with you. I think you need to bring in a lot more help on the defensive side of the ball. When you look at free agency, to me, I know that Jason Kelce just left. I think you have a fine line right now on the offensive side. You have to look at the defensive side of the ball. To me, the offense, if you want to get pieces in the draft, if you want to get a cheap piece, I know everybody wants that third wide receiver, but you have to prioritize defense. I feel like that's something that they never do. And this year, I think it's an absolute must if they want to kind of be better than they were last season and possibly get back to, that Super Bowl bound that everybody wants to talk about. I don't know if it's this year, but they definitely need pieces if they want to even think about putting those words into their mouth.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think, and I hope, maybe this is just wishful thinking, that Howie Roseman, because he did mention this at his press conference, that they kind of focused on the offense more than the defense last year, where if you look at this offense, you should have all the pieces that you need. Yeah, they need a running back if they don't re-sign DeAndre Swift. They probably need a backup tight end and that wide receiver 3, but really all the other positions are there. Maybe a right guard if they don't believe in Tyler Steen. But I'm not as worried about the offense. It's the defense. And they have a ton of cap space. They got a lot of money to spend. So I do expect them to address some positions in the draft, but there's no reason why they can't make a splash in free agency, bring in a linebacker, a safety, maybe another edge rusher. And we could be Super Bowl contenders next year because look at the competition, Kayla. San Francisco is in cap hell. They got all types of issues. They fired their defensive coordinator. They just named a guy who's never been a DC before. The Dallas Cowboys are in cap hell. They got to renegotiate Dak Prescott's deal. Who knows what they're going to do? They're losing their all-pro left tackle. And then you have the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. So I do think the NFC, Eagles got a lot of work to do, but the NFC should be wide open next year.
Yeah, I think it's definitely up for grabs. And I think this year it wasn't even really that strong, but I think you kind of knew your front runners and the 49ers based on what they were able to bring back from the season ago. But yeah, I agree with you. You look at it and you say, okay, well, the Eagles truly have an opportunity to win the conference, host some games at home, and probably bring the playoffs through the city of brother they love when you look at it right now. I always look at the Eagles and I say, okay, be careful of judging this team on paper, because I remember way back 2017, they win the Super Bowl that season. They bring, to me, on paper, was an even better team in 2018 with what they had bringing back. And they kind of crapped the bed from that standpoint in the beginning of the season, trying to bring Carson Wentz back in week 3, everything like that. But to me, on paper, they had a better team than they had that Super Bowl year. So when you look at it, you say, okay, well, on paper, you don't want to judge it too much. But I think we both know it's more than that coming into this season, because on paper, you saw what you saw on the field last year that you can't see again on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, new defensive coordinator, I don't care. You need help on that side, because Darius Slay was playing absolutely everywhere. And as much flack as I gave him last year for not wanting to tackle, you look at Darius Slay and you say, okay, he was probably asked to do 8 different positions, which is not really possible, but you kind of are picking up what I'm saying here in one game, trying to be okay, go here, go flex to that, do what you need to do, come off the field so we can try different things. Darius Slay was kind of put everywhere last year, and I just don't think he was ever truly comfortable. So you need help. You absolutely need help no matter what on the defensive side of the ball. And yes, there's a lot of guys on paper that you could bring in that might look good, but no matter what, you just need more experience on that side. You need a player that can play the game of football on the defensive side, and that is not going to come from the draft. As much as I want to really grow a player to that position, you tried that last season. It didn't work. And you have an offense that can really bring you far, but the defense has to match that. We saw that in the Super Bowl with the 49ers and the Chiefs. The defense made fantastic plays. That's what they want to take if the Eagles want to go to the next level.
I don't disagree. All right, last thing for you. We got to switch over to high school basketball. A lot of controversy yesterday. Camden beats Manasquan. But if you look at the replay, there was time left on the clock when Manasquan puts in the basket to take the lead and win the game. But there's no replay in high school basketball. What's your take on this whole situation?
So I believe I saw the video and they actually said it was good. And then the officials talked it over and actually canceled it and said no. I think it's so tough because, you know, I cover a lot of high school basketball where I'm at right now. And something similar happened where there was 2 teams in Delaware and the home scorebook had a kid at 4 fouls and the away scorebook had a kid at 3 fouls. And he essentially fouled out in the game. And he actually really did it when you look at the scorebooks. And he was their best player with about 50 seconds left to go. And it's in Delaware with no shot clock. So they had the ball at the end there. He's their best scorer, their best player. And you say, okay, well, there's a situation once again where completely unfair if he didn't really foul out because he's their team's best and most experienced player. So I think it's really, really tough. I think you look at it and I feel bad for the kids first and foremost because no matter what, you're going to look at that replay and you're going to say, okay, that went in with enough time. And the officials, they're going to look at it and they're going to go back and they're going to watch their tape and they're going to say, wow, we probably messed up that call. They have to get better. But this is the thing that I always say. When we broadcast these games on the Delmarva Peninsula, we have the glory of having a replay and slow motion and being able to see if the official made the right call or they didn't. These officials are making it in real time and they don't have a replay to look at. If it was easy, they would have that, but they don't. So, you know, I think it's a tough call to judge. And I think that, you know, you kind of look at the official that might have overruled the initial calling of a good basket. But right now at this point, I think it's definitely a little bit tough, you know, to go back and forth. I feel bad for Manasquan. It's definitely tough. Camden's a very good team as well. And if you're Camden, I don't know if you say, did we really win that game? Did we really come out, you know, victorious? Because you look at it and you say, okay, maybe not. But I think tough calls happen in all leagues. And you look at the NBA and there's calls like last night, the Celtics and the Cavs game. I don't know if you saw it, but it was absolutely insane where they called a foul on Jason Tatum. They stopped the clock at 0.7. The Celtics get the ball off the jump ball with 0.2 and the refs say, no, time's done. Well, the Celtics called a timeout with 0.2 seconds left to go. So there was still time on the clock. And you look at that and they actually have the glory of having a replay. So these teams don't, these officials don't. And, you know, it's a long answer to your question, but I think it's tough. In real time, I think it's a difficult call to make. There's a lot going on. They also don't have a shot clock in the state of New Jersey either. So when you look at it, it's really, really tough. I do think that it was the incorrect call, but I also think that, you know, it's going to hurt both of these teams in tough ways. The officials, they're definitely going to get a lot of flack. I do agree that it should have been good, but at this point, there's been nothing in place to overrule. I kind of wish there was, especially with media now, to overrule those circumstances because the game that I was talking about too with the foul trouble, they actually had conversations of replaying the last 50 seconds with that kid in the game in that afternoon following that game, which would be absolutely crazy. But then you kind of get into a weird situation with everybody saying, okay, well, are you going to replay every game if there's a bad call? Is that going to extend it? What
made this one so bad, though, was that the call on the court was that it was good.
Right. And the official overruled it.
They convened and then overturned it, and overturning it was the wrong decision. I think that's what made, because like you're saying, live, it's tough sometimes. So they should have just stuck with the call. But Anyway, we can debate that all we want. Kayla, we appreciate you coming on like you do every Wednesday. I know everybody in the Power Hour crew and in the chat appreciates it. So make sure you're following Kayla everywhere, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. She does a great job covering the Sixers, the Eagles, and really all Philly sports. So have a good week. We'll talk next week, hopefully saying, hey, look who the Eagles signed in free agency.
Yeah, I absolutely hope so. Thank you so much. Fly, Eagles, fly. Hopefully they do something well on the defensive side of the ball.
Talk to you soon, Kayla. Appreciate you. Kayla Santiago does a great job covering the Sixers, the Eagles, and really all Philadelphia sports. And you could also catch her. Sometimes she does the play-by-play for the Delaware Bluecoats and does an awesome job. So I'm telling you, I keep saying, follow Kayla now because one day you're going to say, oh, I remember her when she was on that little Philly Sports Power Hour show because she's going places. Does a great job, Kayla. Works really, really hard as well. So one of the things I saw in the chat was about how the Philadelphia Eagles won't win more than 6 games if they don't have a top 15 defense. And I gave you this stat before, and this is interesting. The last 7 times the Philadelphia Eagles had a top 8 defense in terms of points against, they went to the NFC Championship game. Every damn time they had a top 8 defense in terms of points against, they were in the NFC Championship. 01, 02, 03, 04, 08, 17, and 22. In fact, they've never been to an NFC Championship game without being in the top 10 for points against. So that is imperative that they get this defense right when free agency hits. So I appreciate everybody. A nice little crew today for the Philly Sports Power Hour. But like we end every Power Hour with a little Today in Sports History, we've got a few different things today for you that happened on March 6th. Got to go all the way back to March 6th, 1945. This will make my kids happy. George Neeson received the first patent for the trampoline. Kids love the trampoline. March 6th, 1945. Not necessarily sports related, but I got a couple more. March 6th, 1964. Cassius Clay officially became Muhammad Ali. Today in history, 1964, Cassius Clay changed his name to Muhammad Ali after converting to Islam. And then in 1985, March 6th, 1985, a young boxer by the name of Mike Tyson had his first professional fight, a first-round knockout of Hector Mercedes in Albany, New York. So March 6, 1985, Iron Mike had his first professional fight, and we all know what he became. One of the best boxers of his time, Iron Mike. But I appreciate everybody. Hit that like button for me. Hit that share button for me. Make sure you're following me on all social media platforms. Like I tell you every single week, we'll be back here tomorrow at 10 o'clock. And it'll be our Thursdays with Farzy. My man, Mark Farzetta, will be joining the show tomorrow. We'll get his take on the whole Jason Kelce stuff. Talk to him about the Philadelphia Eagles' needs heading into free agency, which is less than a week away. It's here. I know we all are still upset about how the season ended, but now it's time to look forward and get excited because free agency is hitting, a new league year is beginning, and all that hope will hopefully come back. Appreciate everybody. As always, go Birds.
Go for the polls and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.